Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, Alias Guy. Well, I decided to do a weekend show here. The Liberals are up to their typical tactics. Saving the CEOs of the rich and elite who keep them in power. So, Jobs Minister, used to be Health Minister, Aboriginal Affairs Minister, blah, blah, blah. In other words, one of the new Liberals, the fascist government, which we're going to expose today, says, nope, get back to work. This is what, union number 5 in the last 5 years they've used this really bad legislation to force the unions into arbitrary and not allow the actual company to be held responsible through popular opinion to actually pay their employees. And in this one instance, more than all of the others, these flight attendants are abused. For any of you who have flown before, let me know in the comments, but did you know that they actually didn't get paid for all of the extra hours they did around the airport, shuffling people, guiding, helping seniors in the handicap, double checking tickets, the whole coordination in order to make sure that getting on and off of the plane runs smoothly, let alone all the little things you don't see while you're sitting there waiting, watching them move at 90 miles an hour. They don't get paid for any of that. Not until the door closes and that flight takes off and the door lands and it opens. They're not paid anymore. The Liberals and NDP like to come off, with the help of their mainstream media, they like to come off as for the working class. Now, anybody who actually, knows anything, which is my subscribers, so hopefully if you're new, I urge you to like, share, and subscribe, that these parties are, the NDP are socialists, so they don't care about you. And the new Liberal Party is fascists. They really don't care about you. We're going to prove all this in today's episode. And then we're going to a whole bunch more that we're going to kind of try to delve into, especially with this whole Trump-Putin. I'm going to allow you to hear Putin and Trump after the meeting in its entirety. And their actual little speeches they had are shorter than all of the mainstream propaganda media's misrepresentation, blatant lies in their segments are. They spend more time telling you lies about what they said than the leaders actually said. So I'm going to play a little wee clip just to kind of prove that to you, and of course how dumb these people are. They really want to push their narrative. And then I'm going to give you the links to a documentary that if you've never watched, you need to watch. I have Ukrainian heritage. My family ran from that country mainly because of one family who controlled the propaganda arm, and that would be Chrysler Freeland's grandfather. So, anyways, previous episodes, I do a much better job breaking that down. Because of that, and they're spreading a propaganda, they allowed a hate to grow, which, the little man with the mustache put his hand in the air, Trudeau? No, sorry, guy kind of like him, persecuted my family, and they had to flee. Numbers, huge numbers of my family were never seen again. This history is repeating itself, and with the help of propaganda through most of the Western world, most people aren't even aware of it. So I'm going to give you the chance to, well, the ability to actually click on it. I'll have it posted below, to watch Ukraine on Fire, which is the name of the documentary. And then you'll actually have, well, you'll have 10 times the higher education than every single politician we have in Canada. You'll be like 10 times more educated than they ever will, considering every single one of them stood up like a bunch of deaf, blind, mute seals and clapped and gave a standing ovation to a, well, Nazi in the House of Commons, which today I'm still surprised how many people aren't aware that we had a Nazi in the House of Commons. And yes, every party, every representative stood up. Now, I watch these live every day. I have since I was a teenager, fascinated by the House of Commons, and watched it get destroyed in the last 10 years, by the way. Breaking records, how one party within the first year had broke the records of the most non-answers and the most misinformation ever given. And till this day, it continues. They're the worst. They've destroyed our entire parliamentary system. Now, anyways, to this whole Patty Haidu, let's just get started on this presser. This, you can't make this stuff up, people. Let's just break down the insanity.
However, in this instance, and despite resolution on a number of key items, this dispute will not be resolved quickly enough. And the impact of the work stoppage at Air Canada that began early this morning is already being felt by travelers. This is causing significant harm and has negative impacts on Canadians and the Canadian economy. It impedes the movement of passengers and critical cargo, such as pharmaceuticals, and it strands thousands of Canadians abroad, making it extremely costly and sometimes impossible to book new flights.
Now, this is called gaslighting. This is what they did during the pandemic. This is what they did during the whole Wuhan thing. It's all gaslighting. Fear, hate, and division. Listen to the gaslighting.
Canadians have already sacrificed a lot in this uncertain economy, and this labor disruption is adding to their worries and financial burdens.
Now, who put us in this place, by the way, Patty? Oh, you did. Because you've been in this government. For how many years? This isn't the new Liberal. This isn't Carney's new Liberals. This is the same fascist turd party. Nothing's changed.
As Minister of Labour, I have exercised my authorities under Section 107 of the Canadian Labour Code to direct the Canada Industrial Relations Board to order the parties to resume and continue their operations and duties in order to secure industrial peace and protect the interests of Canada, Canadians, and the economy.
Right, they're protecting us. Protecting us. Sure you are, Patty. Sure you are. I remember you saying this before.
What we know is that the advice from NACI has evolved as we've understood better how best to deploy those tools in our toolbox. And furthermore, what we know is that the vaccines are working. They indeed are saving lives and stopping the spread.
Stopping the spread, are they?
But there is no shortage of supply coming into this country. And I would encourage everybody across the country to stay focused on the main goal at hand, which is to make sure that as many Canadians get vaccinated as quickly as possible, that we do everything in our power to save lives and stop the spread together.
Stop the spread together. Stop the spread together. Now, that was the whole reason. That was the whole push for all of this insanity. That they gaslit everybody. They did everything possible because it's going to stop the spread.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping humanisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
Yeah. It's the same party, people. Lies. They are doing it to line the pockets of themselves and their sponsors. In this case, Air Canada.
Thank you. My follow-up is on impacted passengers. Should Air Canada be liable to fully reimburse passengers who've had canceled flights or, paying their full way for a replacement flight?
Listen, I don't want to speculate on the impact to Air Canada and what their corporate practices are. I know they're deeply concerned about the passengers that are stranded around the globe and here in Canada. And last night, and speaking with the parties, in fact, that was one of the first items that the employer raised, was the work they're putting into trying to ensure that whoever is calling into their call centers has some money on the other end. It is important, though, that we keep the safety, security, and financial security of Canadians first and foremost.
Now, these are lies. So, if the flight attendants are the ones who are answering the phones, which they're not, but if they are they doing it on the plane while it's in the air so they're getting paid? Or are they doing it on the ground where they're not getting paid for working? Do you see? This is gaslighting. This is propaganda. This party is the most disgusting in Canadian history. Just wow.
And it would be my expectation that we all work together to get people home.
And the airlines are concerned?
Hi, Minister. Unions are taking your government to court over your really unprecedented use of Section 107 of the Labour Code, which gives you the unilateral power to essentially, as you're doing today, order striking workers back to work. The unions say this is unconstitutional, that it violates the right to strike. Why does your government continue to use this Section 107?
Well, actually, just recently, I think the CIRB affirmed that in one of the recent disputes, the use of 107 was constitutional. And of course, I know there are a number of...
Who appointed those judges? That would be the Liberal Party.
Pieces of litigation. But listen, in today's decision, this is about industrial peace and the safety of Canadians. Of course, any deal is best if it's arrived at between the parties. But, as we can see, and as as I believe that some of you are reporting on, there are a number of extremely difficult situations and increasingly dire situations that Canadians are facing.
Dire. Ooh.
And we believe that the Industrial Relations Board will help these two parties conclude their negotiations on some key items.
Huh. Interesting. So, trust her.
Experts that I've spoken to about the use of 107 say that the government's repeated use of this is poisoning negotiations because companies believe that they can kind of bargain to an impasse and then the government will step in and prevent a strike from happening. Why did you choose to use 107 so quickly here? I think this is the fastest use of it I've seen. Is your government anti-union?
Oh, they don't like workers. They like slaves. They love slaves. Look at the, completely gone middle class. Now you have those living in poverty and those living below the poverty line. When you have people who at one time, when you made over $100,000, $100,000 to $135,000, you could own a home. Now, CMHC just came out, or no, it's not CMHC. Right. Homes for Humanity. If you make $135,000 or less, you now qualify. Does that not tell you what this party has done to our country?
I absolutely reject the notion that our government is anti-union. In fact, under the previous Liberal government, we considerably strengthened the Canada Labour Code. We banned the use of replacement workers, and we stood side by side with unions in terms of supporting their work. Not only...
Well, it's easy. It's easy to say that. Well, we're going to ban scabs. Yeah. But we're also going to force you to go back to work so that you lose the ability to actually, negotiate fair terms, to bring awareness to the public what's going on. Fascism, people. With the help of propaganda.
Only in labor negotiations, but also in training and recruiting new members. And so this work will continue.
Oh, don't worry. We'll bring in some immigrants. They'll work for free, and they'll work for less than what the Canadians we got right now are working for. So don't worry. We're going to force you back to work, and then we'll just let the company kind of do what it does and do kind of some shuffling and some layoffs, and then we'll just, hire a bunch of, temporary foreign workers subsidized by the government. Oh, yeah. And then paid a lesser wage because they won't argue about not getting paid for hours that they're working, because then they'll get sent home. Yeah, elbows up.
We believe that unions are an essential part of a healthy and growing economy. However, in a case like this, where multiple efforts have been made to conclude an agreement that satisfies both parties, and it is clear that they are at an impasse, it is very clear they need some help in arbitrating the final items.
Really?
Good afternoon. It's great to be with you. My first advice is don't believe what Air Canada is telling you. They are giving out often misinformation. Just this morning, we have seen passengers being told your flight has been canceled and we have no other flights for you for 120 airlines we have searched. We went online and found more than a dozen options for that passenger. Air Canada is trying to push, using deception, passengers to cancel their trips, to opt for a refund instead of asserting their legal right to alternate transportation. Make no mistake, in the current situation, Air Canada owes you alternate transportation and has to rebook you as a passenger, not just on its own or partner airlines, but also on competitors if it is unable to rebook you on its own network or partner airlines. That's what Air Canada doesn't want to do. If you receive such an email, then what you should do is check if you can find yourself a flight, buy the ticket that Air Canada refused to buy for you, and then send Air Canada the bill. Don't just fall for the deceptive misinformation Air Canada is putting out.
That is so interesting to hear you say that, as a passenger, as a customer, you are entitled to alternative arrangements. What should you be saying on the phone then when you're told, I'm sorry, a refund is your only option?
I would say, sir or madam, your only option is comply with the law. The law says you have to provide alternate transportation, and I see on my screen, if that's the case, 10 different flights which would get me on other airlines to my destination. Are you willing to comply with the law and rebook me on that? Or should I do it myself and send you the bill? These are your choices, madam or sir. You have to be extremely assertive. Don't be a pushover and stand your ground.
Okay, that's good advice, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be using it. Do you think that it's going to be a capacity issue at some point for Air Canada rebooking all of these people?
It could become that, and that's a different story. But so far, what I've been seeing is often cases where Air Canada was misleading passengers, fraudulently deceiving them to believe that there are no flights when they were able to go to a different airline or just go online, and they were able to find a number of other options.
And Gabor, at what point are you as a customer entitled to more than a refund or another flight? At what point can you ask for more compensation?
Right now, we are dealing with preemptive cancellations. The strike is not ongoing yet.
Right.
So Air Canada's PR stunt that they are saying orderly shutdown, that holds no water. They still have employees. They still have crew. They could fly passengers. They just don't want to park aircraft at foreign airports or don't want to fly them back to Canada at a higher cost, empty. So they are now making business decisions. Currently, if your flight is canceled now and it is before the strike, you are entitled to meals, accommodation, and up to $1,000 in lump sum compensation. Furthermore, even when the strike is ongoing, if you were starting from the European Union, which has a gold standard passenger protection, unlike Canada's APPR, which is quite problematic, then you are still entitled to meals and accommodation and up to 600 euros in lump sum compensation. Lastly, if your flight is part of an international travel, most international travel is covered by the Montreal Convention, which is a treaty that is also part of the Canadian Federal Carriage by Air Act. It has the force of law in Canada. So that means that if you incur expenses for meals and accommodation, or even lost wages, Air Canada would have to pay for that after the fact. The main difference is that the Montreal Convention operates generally after the fact. You first incur your expense, then you demand the airline to pay. If they don't pay, take them to small claims court. With the APPR and the European regime, the airline is supposed to, let me stress, supposed to provide those upfront. Often they don't. Just make sure you incur expenses, keep the receipts, and then send the bill to the airline. And don't be intimidated if they tell you we don't pay. The translation for when they tell you we don't pay is, please take us to court, then we will pay.
Okay, Gabor Lukic.
You heard that, right? So make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because there are, well, tens of thousands of people right now who are being gaslit and purposefully left out. Like, forgotten on purpose, who have no idea they are being played, just like the Liberal Party has done to Canada for 10 years. Just like they left us stranded during the whole Arrive scam debacle.
So as far as we're concerned here, Global Affairs Canada isn't. Have they been reached out to by people? Do we have any information on, anything that the Foreign Service might be doing?
Well, this is a labor dispute. I mean, I think you're probably recalling a time, I think that we all recall during the pandemic, where all airline travel had shut down and there were no options.
Oh yeah, she just said it. Oh, that's why I started off with her complete gaslighting and lies about the pandemic and the Wuhan right from the beginning. But we're not done there, people. We're not done.
For passengers. That's not the case. There are other options. They're very challenging options, of course, and sometimes there's going to be significant delays, but Air Canada, as I said, is working diligently to try to support its passengers that are currently stranded. There is a very clear guidance from Air Canada to passengers that are outbound to make sure that they check before they arrive at the airport to determine the status of their flight. I would say that would be appropriate. But we will get back to you about whether or not Global Affairs is hearing from Canadians that are reaching out.
Huh.
Thank you.
Right.
February 15, 2021, all non-essential travelers arriving to Canada by land will be required to provide proof of a negative COVID-19 molecular test result taken in the United States within 72 hours of pre-arrival. Essential workers, such as truckers and emergency service providers, as well as cross-border communities, will be exempt from this requirement, and the government will continue to assess exemptions on a case-by-case basis. In addition, as of February 22nd, 2021, travelers entering Canada at the land border will be required to take a COVID-19 molecular test on arrival.
Now, take a very close look. This is the turdo Liberals. Carney says he has a new Liberal Party. Now, who is this at the bottom of the screen? Well, that would be Bill Blair and Anita Anand. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed, people.
As well as toward the end of their 14-day quarantine. Minister Blair will have more details on this in a few moments. For travelers arriving to Canada by air, as of February 22nd, 2021, all air non-essential travelers will be required to take a COVID-19 molecular test when they arrive in Canada before exiting the airport, and another toward the end of their 14-day quarantine period. Air travelers will also be required to reserve, prior to departure to Canada, a 3-night stay in a government-authorized hotel. Travelers will be required to stay at their reserved hotel for up to 3 nights at their own cost while they await the results of their arrival test.
At their own cost? Do you remember this? Do you remember the thousands, tens of thousands of people that were stranded all over the world who couldn't come home, who were caught in countries on layovers? They were halfway through their coming back home in an in an odd destination they didn't want to be in, but now because of these idiots were stranded. Do you remember all of this? On their dollar? Yeah, but she really cares about you. They care about you.
Hotel booking information will be available online as of February 18th, 2021. Travelers will need to book a hotel in the city in which they first arrive in Canada. If they receive a negative result on their arrival test, they will be able to take a connecting flight to their final destination.
Right, okay. This is just one little instance. From hotels to wine and candy, Canada spent $170,000 to bring back women who joined the Islamic State. The federal government spent more than 170 grand to bring women home and their children back to the country after they went over. They went overseas. Their choice. They went overseas to join Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Documents show. The documents, which were released under access to information legislation, took them 2 years, by the way, to grab this. That's how the government's trying to hide this from you. Information legislation containing details of the costs incurred when 8 women along with their children were brought home from Syria. They include costs for business class air travel, and hotel bills in Montreal that include wine, candy, and chocolates. A number of the women have since then been charged with terror offenses. On Friday, the Conservatives held for an investigation of the expenditures in a letter addressed to Jean-Yves Duclos, the chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Global News reported, with Canadians lining up in food banks and record numbers struggling for housing costs, the Liberal government must answer for the $170,000 they had spent. They chose to go, but the government's going to protect them, use your tax dollars. Then you have the alternative universe, the fascist universe, where the government forced people to be scattered all over the globe because they had to follow what the government said was science, that now we know every single thing they said was a lie. Everything they said was a lie.
Just in follow-up to what you had said about speaking with the two parties, how do you know that they wouldn't have been able to reach a deal had you allowed this to continue?
The testimony from both parties gave me confidence that they are so far apart on a number of issues that they are going to need some additional help to reach an agreement in those areas.
Like not paying them when they're at work? I'm still just disgusted by this. I can't believe I do all this research and I never even stumbled upon this. How embarrassing. We live in a country that literally has slave labor. And I remember when I was younger, my wife was waitressing. I remember, and we talked about this here yesterday. I said to her, do you remember when I said to you that probably the two hardest working, underpaid, under-respected jobs that through my early career at that time, I ran across often and had nothing but the utmost respect for? Yeah. Waitresses, waiters, and stewards, flight attendants. On their feet, dealing with the worst of the worst, smiling 24 hours a day. This is a fascist government, people. They don't care about you. All you unioners, I'm not saying, because I know the unions out west sure didn't vote for them. They know what's going on. But out east and up north, where they have nothing but brainwashed television, they don't hear nothing but propaganda. This is complete and utter failure by a government who has shut down Parliament during the most existential threat, supposedly Trump, when China's tariffs are 1,000 times harder on Canada, but nobody wants to talk about that because propaganda controls it. Shuttered Parliament. Could be in Parliament right now and legislate. All they have to do is put in legal framework. They just got to legislate it. The second that a person gets there, you cannot ask them to do anything without being paid? How about legislate it? And then how about put fines in? Not fines that the taxpayers are going to have to pay for. Take it out of the CEOs and their bonuses. Oh, and don't worry, we're going to get to there right away.
Could you just give an example or speak to something about the tone, or if there's one particular issue that you could highlight? I'm just looking for some kind of concrete point, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess, I'm not going to negotiate in public on behalf of the parties. It's
course
very
not.
important that those conversations happen.
All you have to do is legislate. All you have to do is open up Parliament. Do your damn job. But no. They're protecting their corporate buddies.
And between the parties, the CIRB is exactly the right place to help them finish. There are a number of items that have been concluded or that have been satisfied. In fact, in a public letter that the union distributed a number of days ago, they indicated as much. But there are some significant differences, and they have been. As I said, the parties worked throughout last night. There was another offer tabled by the employer. It was clear it was unacceptable at that point. The parties are very far apart. And so this additional help of an arbitrator will help them close that gap.
Well, let's just take you back.
We are moving to that point, though, of reopening, and the expert panel says, a system to provide proof of vaccination should be implemented as soon as possible. So do you have a sense of what your timeline for this might be, and how quickly or how soon could you make that happen?
Well, we certainly have a head start with the ArriveCAN app, allowing for digital submission of documentation, for example. People should check it out, even if they're not travelers yet.
Propaganda. How many millions did Canada get ripped off for? When we had people working out of their basements who sat down on their sofas together on a weekend, drinking beer, watching football games, that created an app that they say they could have done for $36,000 to $86,000 and worked more proficiently than the app that this government laundered millions upon millions of dollars on, that they're not even going to fight to get back. No, they decided no, and nope, they shut down committee. Not happening. No, we're not fighting for it. No, there's no way we can't get that money back. Whoa, no, they don't want anybody to look into it. They don't want to see who all was involved, who all in the Liberal Party had their, pockets lined, palms greased. Ooh, not a comment. Well, they forced Canadians, shuttered Canadians, left Canadians stranded while they were subsidizing their friends at Air Canada.
This is an app that helps facilitate the uploading of documentation like test results and ideally vaccination results. So we've got a head start in terms of the ability and some of the technology necessary.
I'm not even going to play any more of that because that's, just craziness. But let's not forget.
Now we're seeing politicians and health bureaucrats trying desperately to rewrite history, trying to convince people that they never advocated for crippling illiberal lockdowns, vaccine mandates, school closures. No, it's not their fault. They just made recommendations. I didn't think anyone would be stupid enough to actually follow them or enforce them. Along with Australia and New Zealand, Canada was right up there for COVID madness. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau now claims that's just disinformation. He says he never insisted that everyone, young and old, healthy and infirm, get vaccinated against COVID. That's just fake news. Let's have a quick look at what Justin is saying now and what he said back then.
Misinformation and disinformation is carrying people to believe things that are untrue. And vaccinations is a perfect example of it. Any vaccine we distribute to Canadians will be safe for Canadians. There are people who've probably gotten very sick from vaccinations. Every vaccine that is approved is safe for Canadians, is uncompromising. Well, individuals are allowed to make their own choices. There may be all sorts of different reasons why someone is hesitant to get vaccinated. There's no more excuses to not get your shot. And therefore, while not forcing anyone to get vaccinated, enforcement measures in place will make sure that everyone is vaccinated. I chose to make sure that all the incentives, travelers across the country need to be fully vaccinated. People coming into the country need to be fully vaccinated. We're there, don't get to work in the public service, don't get to go to movie theaters or gyms or restaurants.
That compilation courtesy of Milk Bar TV. But Trudeau is not alone. This week we saw Anthony Fauci, the man responsible for so much of the dysfunction surrounding our COVID response. Well, Fauci now claims the heavy-handed response was not his doing. Speaking to the New York Times, he tried to absolve himself of all responsibility. Show me a school that I shut down, he said. Show me a factory that I shut down. Never. I never did. These people, my goodness, we can never forget what they inflicted on us, and there must be a reckoning for all the politicians and public health officials for the insane overreach, the inhumane policies inflicted on free people in the name of safety.
Public health officials. Yes. Which this lady was. Yes. So, keep going there, Patty Hadjdu. Let's hear some more gaslighting for your sponsors.
And just for clarity, obviously you can continue to negotiate while you're on strike or while you're locked out.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's a great reminder. Thank you. Parties could continue to negotiate, and they could still have the opportunity to come up with an agreement that satisfies the members and the corporation.
Good. So then they're negotiating.
I'm just curious, are they negotiating today at this moment?
My last information was that they were not. My hope is that they will continue to seek a resolution that is jointly arrived at together. Because, as I said in my opening remarks, the best agreement is the one that is found at the table, and not just for members or the corporation, but for the long-term peace and stability of the organization and its relationship with the employees. Listen, I have actually been an employer in a unionized environment previous to politics, and I can tell you that strike activity creates a very challenging environment to resume operations.
Blah, blah, blah. Lies, misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. This is absurd. This is right off the Liberal Party's platform sheet. Provide up to 5 new paid leave days for federally regulated employees who experience a miscarriage or stillbirth, which can happen in up to 1 to 5 pregnancies. Strengthen provisions in the Canadian Labour Code to better support women that need to be temporarily reassigned to other duties during pregnancy while breastfeeding. Create a fairer collective bargaining process to introduce legislation to prohibit the use of replacement workers, scabs, when a union employer in a federally regulated industry has locked out employees, which is what happened. They got locked out. They signaled yesterday they were going to go on strike, and right away Air Canada locked them out and started causing chaos to everyday Canadians not involved in this in order to shift the hurt on regular Canadians towards the flight attendants. Do you see this? What's going on here? Fascism. Corporate control with the help of propaganda, which is controlled by the political party, the regime in power, are fascist liberals. Protect public post-secondary education institutions such as Laurentian University from being subject to corporate restructuring. Blah, 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 blah. All lies. It's gaslighting. People fell for this.
After a 10-year collective agreement is to end the abuse of unpaid work by this company and to win a desperately needed cost of living increase for all of our members, but especially our junior flight attendants. In recent years, Air Canada has been recording billions in profits, all while their flight attendants are forced to carry out hours of critical safety-related duties without pay. Everything from pre-flight safety checks to boarding, deplaning, to attending to medical and safety emergencies are done at no charge to the airline. Today, a junior Air Canada flight attendant working full-time will earn just $1,952 a month pre-tax.
Pre-tax, people. Pre-tax. And you know what the Liberals have done in the last 10 years, where our taxes are, and it's not just on the actual federal income tax, on our, checks. It's the increase of taxes across the board. Every single thing has gone up 23%. And again, previous episodes, this whole removal of the carbon tax was a bullshit scheme. They're just going to increase what they hide, which they're already in, cahoots trying to do, because it's escalated tax. And the media won't talk about it. But they also decided, well, we're going to make sure we really screw Canada, and we're going to put counter tariffs on the United States the same time so that Canadians don't see how much money this carbon tax was actually costing them. They don't care about you. This party is out of control.
So again, $1,952 pre-tax per month. For comparison, someone working full-time at federal minimum wage will earn $2,840. We believe our flight attendants deserve a wage they can live with. I do think that this is something we can settle at the bargaining table, but it takes two parties to entertain that. Unfortunately, again, Air Canada hasn't come back to discuss wages. They seem to feel that our flight attendants are best suited with an 8% wage increase that will still keep them at the poverty level. And that respectfully is the challenge. They need to understand they have to come with more.
The negotiation started with CUPE demanding increases in compensation of more than 100%. Our latest offer included an increase of 38% in total compensation, including benefits and pensions over 4 years. And most importantly, it included an offer for ground pay, an offer that has been in our offers for months. We never left the table. We are engaged throughout the entire process. We have made offers and responded to every offer CUPE has made, including the last one. We are still available to bargain at any time, on the condition that the negotiation has substance.
Air Canada is counting on the government doing what they've done to railway workers, to postal workers, and to dock workers. And that's to come in and squash the strike before it happens.
This is the truth. Let's not forget, Air Canada gets a $4.7 billion bailout. Air Canada and the Canadian federal government have agreed upon a liquidity package of the airline for $4.7 billion. Importantly, as part of the deal, Air Canada will offer refunds to customers who purchased non-refundable airfares since February 2020, but did not travel. In addition, the carrier will not retract travel agency commissions on those refundable fares. Under the financing agreement, Canada will take a $399 million stake in Air Canada, purchasing shares at a price of $18.48, a discount on the stock's Monday closing price of $21.53. The federal government also holds warrants exercisable for the purchase of an additional 14.58 million Air Canadian shares at $21.74. Canada will loan Air Canada up to $4.3 billion, with up to a $1.12 billion directed specifically toward customer refunds. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Air Canada CEO got paid $12.4 million in 2022, a whopping 233% pay increase. If you got a raise last year, chances are it was nowhere near as much as what Air Canada paid CEO Michael Rousseau. In 2022, Rousseau earned a $12.38 million, a jump of 233% compared to a previous year. Air Canada has published a 100-page notice of annual shareholders document detailing compensation for the company executives. The company received funding from the government, and part of the clause involved restrictions of an executive's pay. With those restrictions now gone, executives saw pay rises of over 100%. According to the document 2021, Rousseau was paid a $3,700,000+ in share-based awards option, annual incentive plans, and pension value following the retirement of his predecessor, Callan Revenue, 2 years ago. Rousseau took the helm as Air Canada's chief executive officer in 2021. This year's numbers, oh, look at this. 3.7 million, 1.3 million, 1.08 million, 1.1 million, 1.06 million. Hey, man. And these guys are heavily supporters of who? The Liberal Party. And this isn't just this Liberal Party, people. This is when I say the Laurentian elite, this is what I talk about. Now, again, I could post thousands and thousands of documents, but I'm just going to go all the way back to the turd's dad. Here we go. So this is a fascinating document. Now, there is a pile of information inside this document. I'm talking a pile of information, okay? So, change at the top of Air Canada, the governing Liberal Party perspective and analysis of non-corporal actants. Now, this is a major breakdown. There was a lot of, well, digging that went in to produce this document. This has all been proven, and as always, I give my viewers access to everything that I put on my episodes. It's called knowledge, and it's the truth. Sorry, just the truth, just the facts. Pay attention carefully. Now, this has to do, I urge you to read this. It's a long document. Now, I'm probably end up going over this in a future episode, especially with all this Air Canada stuff going on right now. But I just want you to listen very carefully to one little wee paragraph in there, okay? In the analysis of an actor network of political operatives, critical sense-making, CSM, Helms Mills, Thurlow and Mills, 2010, is more prominent in the 7 moves searching for NCAs than it might be in another study. The rationale behind this is the nature of politicians, which tends to focus on the desire to get re-elected, or for those in the back room to get their guy or party elected and re-elected so they can wield power. Political persons seem to network because networks are necessary to secure power rather than being motivated by affiliation or achievement. Get it? Trudeau, 1993. Affiliation is a means of building alliances for power in the political structure. When the Air Canada management refused to support Hellier's promise during the leadership campaign to keep the Winnipeg shops open, it seems affiliation with Herb Seagram, then executive vice president of Air Canada, was no longer of value to Hellier. Yves Pratt, who was appointed CEO of Air Canada in the autumn of 1968, had been mentioned by Trudeau as a possible candidate, so it is conceivable that Hellier thought appointing Pratt would build his influence with Trudeau in order to surface the NCA's president and his network to have to delve deeply into the sense-making of the individual actors within the network. Therefore, in this paper, as it is processed through the 7 moves described in Herod, the analysis will focus on the properties of the sense-making situation. Now, it goes down and it breaks everything down. It names names. I'm talking huge names, and a lot of really familiar names come up. Now, I'm not going to deal with the pile of them, but as you scroll down on this, you end up realizing that, oh my God, it actually does the same thing with CN and CPR. And then you start to find more names, more strings, more connections. And son of a gun, whose name pops up? Well, Michael Sabia pops up. Again, why was he appointed to certain positions? You want to hear all of the connections, the corporate sponsors, the Laurentian elite. This is just a side note. This is a cross path. Oh, sorry, a walk in the woods they don't want you to know about. Big fines. Don't worry, I'm going to get censored on this anyways because I'm talking about the Wuhan virus. But just listen carefully to where this man has worked. And these all fall back on the previous document I just showed you. So let's just get started here. So now that he's in the Privy Council office appointed by Mark Carney, he's worked for Canadian National Railway. He's worked for Bell Canada. He was put on the board of directors for the Ontario's Teachers Pension Plan. Right? Don't forget, Caisse de dépôt, the placement. That's another pension plan in Quebec, which all of their money, by the way, is in Brookfield. In what? Pipelines. Where? Outside of Canada. Previous episodes for all my new watchers and subscribers. But don't worry, it doesn't end there. Monk School of Global Affairs, University of Toronto, Canada Infrastructure Bank. All right, those are the guys. And by the way, the date, I'll read the date of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Here, in 2020, Sabia was appointed as chairperson of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. This is the bank that just gave a $1 billion loan to build what? Ferries in China for who? EB and BC. Oh, all these ties to CCP. And then all of these Laurentian elites and this whole Liberal Party. And don't forget, he was also named to the board of the MasterCard Foundation. Interesting. This shit never gets old, people. Never gets old. Now, moving that all aside, let's listen to the entirety of Putin's address.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We have very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor. Very good to see you. In good health and to see you alive." I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the US island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the US, and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of, more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they have fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. and special envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation. However strange it may sound in these conditions, we have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible, and our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there was a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope we'll succeed in that, in political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then, that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. And I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, businesslike, and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr.
Now,
President. That was.
I'm just going to play a short clip of CTV. And this absolute waste of skin who calls himself a political correspondent.
That was a surreal moment in a day where we just saw so much high drama and political theater. And of course, everyone was watching and waiting to see what type of response, what type of outcome we might have from the meeting of these two men over a nearly 4-year-long war. And what we got was absolutely nothing. Donald Trump went on and on about the Russia hoax and talking about his great relationship with
Remember that. On and on talking about the Russian hoax. On and on.
Vladimir Putin. But what was missing was, of course, all of the threats and the recriminations that were expected if, in fact, there was no deal. And as, of course, we knew that he said that in the first few minutes, he would know if, in fact, there would be an agreement. And clearly, we saw nothing, and which makes clear that this entire event was not only staged, but it was staged to give the credibility and the imprimatur of prestige to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
All right, and he goes on. This is a clip too. I'm not going to give the whole thing. They, like I said, all the propaganda right now, they're running segments longer, trying to tell you what Trump said, lying and gaslighting to the actual statement's length of the entirety of what Trump said. So let's listen to Trump go on and on about Russiagate.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all. But we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax. But what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so on and on. I timed it. There it is. 26 seconds. And I timed the entirety of all of the sentences. So there's probably a good 6 seconds or 8 seconds where he wasn't actually on the, Russia, Russia, Russia. 26 seconds. Our media, on and on and on. Now, how long did he talk for? Let's see. Started at 51 minutes, ended at 54.5 minutes. So 3.5 minutes, 26 seconds about the Russiagate. Propaganda, people. Propaganda. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Unbelievable. Our complete political system is a joke. We are led by morons. I can't stress it enough. You literally can't make this stuff up, people. And I'm going to get censored hardcore because, sorry, I just say the truth, just the facts, and I don't want to treat my audience like children. So you got to see and hear all of the words that our political leaders at the time, well, all of the people who have the right to freedom of speech, who get to say those words, pokey poke and the Wuhan and all the rest of that, freely on all of the propaganda media. But if you're not part of the CRTC propaganda state paid, you're not allowed to say it. You're censored. Welcome to my show. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Check out my merch. Got some great clothes. More coming out. If not, you can always donate. Email's right there. Till next time, I'm Alias the Guy. You've been watching Canadian Citizen Journal. Stay informed.